to the computer. And
I'm watching, even though Sam's going to be.
I share the screen. I share the entire screen.
Share the entire screen.
And promote the people if you can.
I don't know if they're here yet. Are they
Okay.
here yet, Sam?
Oh, we should
Presenters.
do the list instead.
Yeah.
Damn it. Come on. Do you need to?
Participants.
Yeah.
Who's
You can use the more action there and
which one?
Yes.
And who else?
Can you get rid of that X?
Yep.
Scroll. Sharon.
Not here yet.
Doesn't look like it. But that's fine. Good time. All
All
right.
right.
So
Well, maybe
we
we'll just
should-
promote them later.
Yeah.
Just close this.
So we can just
this.
bring up,
Just
bring up Sarah's presentation and share it on Zoom, and then we're ready to rock and roll.
It's already sharing.
Is it? Awesome?
I think so. Hopefully people on Zoom can see it. I'll go get on my laptop so I can monitor the chat.
Cool. Yeah, right now we don't want this showing. We want this showing.
Jane, can you see the slides?
Yay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna spotlight this. Spotlight. All right. And I'm gonna look in the chat. Yay, thank you, Alex. Excellent. Let's go, people. I am a harsh task mistress. I run a tight ship. You all know that's a lie if you saw me this morning. All right. We'll look outside and see if you guys can yell at. It gave me a yell. All right. Looks like we're here. And we're recording. Hello, C2. How are we doing? Everybody holding up? Last session of the day. No promise of free drinks. It's a tough one, I know. And no chocolate. I don't understand people that don't have chocolate in the afternoon. All right, well, welcome to this afternoon session. In case you, for some bizarre reason, don't know who I am, I'm Sam Cannon. I'm president of IASSIST and the chair for this session. And I'd like to point out my lovely assistant. I was going to make a Vanna White joke, but then I realized that A, that ages me, and B, it's American centric, and C, that's probably an insult to you. So Sophia is going to be helping us out with monitoring questions and whatnot. We do have a mic for people in the room who are asking questions to make sure that the folks on Zoom can hear us. And for the folks who are connecting remotely, if you have questions, please put them in the Whova app. It's easier for Sophia to see it there and ask it of the presenters here. I believe we have one AWOL presentation. For some reason, the third presentation from Zimbabwe has never responded to any emails, and I don't know anything about their participation. So this is actually be a 4 presentation session. So each person will have about 20 minutes total to do their talk and take questions. Originally, because it was a 5-person session, we were going to take all the questions at the end to make sure we had enough time. Now things are a little bit more relaxed, so we can take things easier. So I want to start by introducing our first speaker. Sarah Young is a social science librarian at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She serves as liaison to public policy, politics and strategy, information systems, and statistics and data science. That's a portfolio. She is a member of CMU's library's Open Science and Data Collaboration Program, which supports researchers in learning and using open science practices and connects them to resources and expertise for data analysis. Today, she will be talking to us about providing real-world data experiences, libraries as clients and data providers in student consulting projects. She's presenting work done jointly with Huajin Wang. Okay, also Carnegie Mellon University. So please welcome Sarah. Yeah, clap.
I need to stand on my tiptoes here. I'm too short for this country. Everything is like way taller than me. So thank you very much, San. So I'm, like San mentioned, I'm presenting this work in collaboration with my colleague Huajin Wang, who's our co-director for our Open Science and Data Collaborations program. And I also want to mention Professor Peter Freeman, who is in our Statistics and Data Science department and very much involved in all of these projects, really facilitating and overseeing all of this work. I'm not sure if that is going to go away or let's see, there it is. Okay. So I think, as a lot of us know and recognize, there's a lot of value to having students and learners work with authentic real world data in applying their computational and data science skills in order to sort of achieve those higher level data literacy learning outcomes. And I think in a typical undergraduate program, this tends to come later on in the undergraduate experience. So maybe as sort of a senior capstone project. At CMU, we actually have a lot of faculty in our statistics and data science department doing research on statistical learning, statistical education. And they really advocate for this idea of authentic practice early and often in the undergraduate experience. These are just a couple of examples of recent papers that our faculty have written on this topic. And so our undergraduates in statistics and data science get a lot of opportunities to work with real world data and real world clients, starting as rising sophomores with the summer undergraduate research apprenticeship. There's 2 credit-bearing courses, one in the sophomore year and one in the junior and senior year, in addition to other opportunities through capstones and independent study. And so in this context and as liaison to our statistics and data science program, I would often get requests from faculty looking for good real-world data sets for students to work with. We get these requests a lot through other departments as well. And this is probably, if you're a liaison librarian like me, I'm sure you've gotten these questions as well. But a few years ago, our Peter from our statistics department came to us looking not just for real-world data sets, but also real-world data owners or clients that students could engage with and work with. So he was interested in whether or not the library could connect him to, say, other researchers on campus who have, data sets that they've collected. Wait, I'm gonna try to get rid of that. Hopefully not a bad sign. Eeks.
Just minimize the window.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So researchers on campus that might have data sets that they've had lying around and haven't had time to really dig into, or even external clients in the public or private sector who might have data and not have the time or expertise to analyze it. So in this query, we sort of realized that, wait a second, we, the library, actually have a lot of data that we don't have time to really leverage and maybe not the expertise to analyze. And so this sort of got us thinking about all of the different kinds of data that we as a library have and what could potentially serve as a nice model for real world data experiences for students. So this slide is just meant to give you a picture of some of the types of data that we find in libraries. Certainly library usage data, whether it's circulation data or usage of our electronic collections, our spaces, our website. We have data in our collections. Certainly collections metadata can be a really rich, interesting data set to analyze. Archival data can be interesting. Again, collections metadata there, but also textual data that might be in digitized collections, and even data in our subscription databases. So for example, bibliometric data, which you'd find in a database like Web of Science or Dimensions, that can really help us understand the funding and publishing landscape at our own university. There's even some public data sets out there that have been published that are relevant to the work that we do. So I'm thinking of a data set that was published a few years ago in Science. That was a large survey that was done to look at practices around data reuse and sharing. And so analyzing that, for our own sort of customized questions can help inform our own work. So we started working with these students a few years back, and ever since, pretty much every semester, we've worked on different projects with student groups as a part of these undergraduate research experiences. And this just gives you a sense of some of the projects we've worked on and some of the skills that they're applying in these different projects. So common across all of these projects are things like data cleaning, data wrangling. None of these data sets are just ready to analyze. They require work, statistical analysis, exploratory data analysis, and data visualization. And then more specifically, some of these projects have really addressed certain skill sets, either early on in the undergraduate education or later. So we've had projects that really help students develop those basic statistical and data exploration skills. And then some more advanced projects that actually apply natural language processing, machine learning classification, and even working with APIs. Students have also developed Shiny apps. And I should say that at CMU in the statistics department, there's a real emphasis on using R. So students are taught R quite early, and all of these projects are R-based projects. So to give you sort of a sense of the logistics of this kind of work, typically, Professor Friedman offers a call for projects before the semester begins. This goes out to a lot of partners on campus. We, the library, typically propose one project with a brief description, initial research questions, and then a preliminary version of the data set. Students are then given a list of all of these projects that have come in from across campus, and they opt into the projects that they're interested in working on. We typically meet with these student groups. These are groups of 3 or 4 typically. We as the library clients, and also with Peter as the faculty advisor and often a graduate student mentor. And then we have periodic meetings throughout the semester, usually 2 or 3 meetings where the students can present, sort of give us a project update, and we can provide feedback and direction for where we want to see the project go. And then finally, at the end of the semester, students present their work in a final presentation. And that's when we can sort of invite the broader library staff and faculty, as well as other relevant stakeholders from campus. So just to give you a snapshot of a couple of projects that we've worked on. This one was one of the earlier ones that was really geared toward early education statistics students who were just learning how to do statistical analysis, explore data, and do data visualization. They were using our circulation, sort of our print circulation data, and were able to provide some really interesting visualizations for us to sort of think about, how are we staffing our circulation desk? What is the usage around certain pieces of our collection that might help inform collection development? Another project that has sort of crossed over multiple semesters and multiple student groups and is actually ongoing was one that has engaged with the more later career students, so juniors and seniors. And here we actually had them working with Dimensions data. So if you're familiar with Dimensions, it's a database that contains both scholarly publications, but also information about patents and funding. And so we were interested in what we could learn from the Dimensions data about past funded research for our researchers. And the students were able to build a really sort of customized, useful dashboard for us to explore the funding data at our university. So that was a really useful tool that we've been able to use in our own work with departments. And then this has moved into a new project where students are working both with that dimensions data, looking at past funded research, past publications, and using topic modeling and other machine learning techniques to match that information to grant opportunities from the Grant Forward database. So they're helping us build a tool where we can use, we can help connect researchers to potential grant funding based on their past research and funding. And this has been really great. We've actually engaged with our foundation relations folks on campus who are really interested in this work and using it to inform their own services to campus. So a few things to say about benefits to the libraries. We've certainly learned things from the data that we have that I think we would not have had time or perhaps expertise to really gain that knowledge. The students have developed these great tools that we can use both internally, but also with campus partners and patrons. We've established sort of ongoing partnerships with department faculty and also with some of these other entities on campus. And then it's just really been a great pleasure to work with these talented students. I mean, I'm always just amazed by how kind of the work that they do. It's been really a great pleasure. So from the student side, I think we can assume that they're applying knowledge and skills that they've learned in class to this real world kind of experience. They're practicing this consulting and communication skills. They're able to showcase this work both to the department, but also at campus-wide student research events. And they're developing projects and tools that they can put into resumes and portfolios. The image here on the left is of the first piece of the Dimensions project. Dimensions actually kind of got word of this work and were really excited about it. They ended up interviewing the students in a recorded webinar that's now available for anyone to watch on the Dimensions website. So this is a great thing that the students can showcase as they move into the workforce. And then also, hopefully connecting students to library services and support that they may not have been connected to otherwise. So some considerations and limitations for this work. Certainly thinking about privacy issues when we're talking about library usage data. Haven't really run into this issue yet. We've been able to sufficiently anonymize any data that students have used. But there are projects that we think would be interesting where that might be a bit of a barrier. Also thinking about the fact that students are using proprietary data in some of these databases. So how useful is that as a tool beyond the campus community? We've had some interesting thoughts too about potential projects with archival data, but of course a lot of that is tied up in non-digital format. So that could be a barrier to those sorts of projects. Also thinking about continuity and sustainability with these projects. So like I said, we've had at least one project that has carried through multiple student groups. The statistics department typically manages these projects, and so they're looking at continuity and sustainability, but I think there are things that we as the library can bring to that conversation as well. And then of course, the time and resources that we allocate to working with these students. But I will say that's been pretty minimal. We, like I said, meet with students a few times a semester, and they really are the ones doing all the work. So for future directions, thinking about project management, what can we as a library bring to these projects? Maybe thinking about using something like Open Science Framework or GitHub to manage and store these projects. Assessing student learning. So the statistical and data science department is doing some of this, but I think there are learning outcomes that we as a library might be interested in addressing as well. We haven't really done that yet. I'm also sort of, interested in thinking about kind of a typology of library data. So from that one slide, you saw that if you really think about it, there's so much data in libraries, and it would be kind of interesting to pull that together. Think about the types of skills that could be put to use in working with that kind of data in this authentic practice context. And also opportunities that there might be with students outside of the statistics and data science department. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and wrap up, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Love presenters that I don't have to laugh my time like that. Do you have any questions? Here comes the mic. You're not ready to run and shoot.
I'm not. Test, yep, okay. Yeah, thanks.
So I was just wondering if I understood correctly, the students worked on that project and developed a tool that actually could be useful for the university. And I was wondering about like ownership of, like, is it clear that when the students make a tool that the university can own that, or is that unproblematic? Maybe it is unproblematic. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't really know the answer. I think the statistics department, Professor Freeman really manages the outputs of this work. These typically live, like the apps will live on a statistics server. We've not had conversations about that with them, and it hasn't come up, but it's a really interesting question, and I makes me want to go back and ask that question when we're back on campus.
All right, chair's prerogative.
No, so I've actually done some work with this, and I think a lot of it depends on what your library's IP policy is, or the
Okay.
university's IP policy is. I know the most recent university that I was at was very clear that anything that was made with university resources. Now, this was faculty focused more than anything else. And so that's probably going to be where the issue is whether or not it's considered. My suspicion is regardless of what's on paper already, CMU is going to want to own it, right?
Right.
And so that's going to be the conversation. And I spent a lot of time working with our legal department to talk about, can we talk about perpetual non-exclusive licensing so that the students could take this and do something with it going forward. And you'll be surprised to know that private institutions aren't really as interested in that as they might be.
Other questions?
Well, can we thank Sarah again then? Thank you. All right, I got my glasses. Now this is going to be interesting. I want to make sure that we actually have our next participant in.
So can you hear and see me?
Oh, not yet, but let me find you.
Okay.
Where are you? There you are. There you are. I need to make you a co-host.
Okay.
Yes, I want to make Sharon a co-host so that she can share her slides, and we don't have to do that whole fun next slide, please, dance. So let me
Okay.
get ready, and then I will find your beautiful smiling face. There it is. And I will make sure that everybody can see you. Replace spotlight. And you are the speaker, and this is there. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. I'll share.
I'm going to
my
introduce you.
screen
Wait,
then.
I forgot my notes again. I'm so organized, and I'm not. Everybody knows it now. So Sharon, it's nice to see you.
Hello, it's nice to see and hear you all too. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I bet you're having a great time because Gothenburg is a lovely city.
Oh, we'd be having a great time no matter where we are,
Yeah.
but yes, Gothenburg, a ton of fun. All right,
Okay.
so let me find where you are. All right, and I'm going to introduce you like professionally-ish. So Sharon Bolton is the data curation manager at the UK Data Service based at the University of Essex in the UK. She has over 20 years experience in data and metadata curation and management and project work. In addition, Sharon leads the CESSDA ELSST development team and also participates in the CESSDA Metadata Office project. She'll be presenting today on moving with the times, multilingual thesaurus management in a changing environment. So Sharon, please enlighten us.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to talk today about some work that we've done as the CESSDA ELSS team over the past 3 or so years to upgrade the system for CESSDA's long-standing European Language Social Science Thesaurus, or ELSS. We're going to look at how the team managed the work, working alongside CESSDA partners and other organisations as well, and how the process helped us not only to upgrade the software, but also the metadata standards and to create some new possibilities for ELSS as well. Okay, so just a bit of background on ELSS to start with. As we just heard, it's the European Language Social Science Thesaurus, and it's owned and published by CESSDA, who, if you don't know, is the Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. It's a broad-based multilingual thesaurus for the social sciences. As you can see, it's got around 3,000 plus concepts covering quite a wide range of disciplines. It conforms to ISO 25964, which is the international standard for thesauri and interoperability with other vocabularies too. Now, in case you're not familiar with thesauri in this sense, they're actually used for adding topic keywords to data and to other items as well. For example, we know that it's used for documents by some organisations. The keywords are usually added into their metadata records, and this enables you to describe diverse items that cover the same topics using the same keywords. And so it helps searching in a catalogue and helps produce consistent search results. Now, ELST is a partnership very much between the CESSDA service providers, and we develop the content in a very collaborative way with a lot of discussion between international partners. And we do this because we need to make sure that terms and concepts that we want to add or update are meaningful internationally and not just in English, because obviously, you know, different terms mean different things in other countries. Once we've settled on the English description after discussion, the content is then translated by our partner organisations who are CESSDA service providers. And if they experience any issues that we haven't picked up when we've been deciding on terminology, then they report them back to us and we go back to the drawing board again. We'll see a bit more about CESSDA on the next slide for those of you who don't know much about it. Basically, CESSDA service providers are generally national data archives whose countries are members of CESSDA, and they're responsible for providing the relevant services, and they take part in training and that sort of thing. There's quite a diverse range of organisations in CESSDA, and it covers not only EU countries, there's also non-EU countries as well. Going back to ELST, it's currently available in 14 languages, and this year for the September 2022 release, we're very much hoping to add Hungarian and Icelandic, so it'll soon be 16 languages. It's available under a Creative Commons share-alike 4 international license, and you can download the whole thing freely from Zenodo. You can also download individual concepts from the CESSDA ELST interface itself. We believe most users download the whole thing from Zenodo. Okay, here's a bit of background about CESSDA. It basically started in 1976 with just a few countries, and it became an ERIC, or a European Research Infrastructure Consortium, in 2017. It currently has 22 member countries and 1 observer. Obviously, we have fewer languages in ELST currently than are available across the 22 member countries, and we're hoping to add new languages all the time, really. I'll talk a bit more about that later. The aims of CESSDA are to provide a full-scale sustainable research infrastructure to facilitate teaching and learning and so on, as with the statement on here. And CESSDA funds services, tools and projects, and the development of products and so on as well. And ELST is currently run as a CESSDA service, having been developed in several projects over the years. Okay, here's a bit about the history of ELST as well. It was basically based on the Humanities and Social Science Electronic Thesaurus, or HASSIT, which was developed by the UK Data Archive at the University of Essex. The LIMBA project, which was funded by the EU, funded the translation of HASSIT into French, German and Spanish, and basically created ELST in 2000. After LIMBA, we were able to get some funding through additional EU organisations and the UK government as well. But in 2012, CESSDA took over the development of ELST, and so we've moved the ownership of ELST to CESSDA now. Because the UK Data Service really developed HASSIT and ELST and coordinated the LIMBA project, both HASSIT and ELST were managed in a common interface until 2019, and this was software which was developed in-house at UKDS. basically it had reached its end of life by 2019. It was time to update it, and we also wanted to separate HASSIT and ELST as well, because the UK Data Service would retain ownership of HASSIT, which is just the English monolingual version. And ELST really, because it had been funded by CESSDA, we wanted to move the licensing and the platform to CESSDA too. So over 3 years or so, we started doing some serious planning and testing for a system upgrade, and that was done within the CESSDA Metadata Office project, task 2. And then subsequently, the actual work of moving to a new system was then carried out by, again, the CESSDA funded Ontology Management System project in 2020. The UK Data Service collaborated with the Finnish Social Science Data Service as well, and also the CESSDA platform team based in Bergen in Norway. And we all work together nowadays, and in fact from that point on, to run ELST as a CESSDA service. Both the UK Data Service and FSD have many years experience in metadata expertise and thesaurus management, and I think that we've worked quite successfully to move ELST really into its current and modern setting. Okay, so after a great deal of planning and exploration of various software possibilities, we chose 2 open source solutions, one for internal thesaurus management, where we would do the editing of this thesaurus and so on, and one as a browser system, which is the system that users see online. And we looked at various kinds of software. Some were licensed, owned by software companies, and were very, very expensive, but with a high level of functionality, definitely. We decided on the open source solution, which is Workbench, and it's a very highly regarded platform. You can use it to manage thesauri and other vocabularies as well. It has a lot of facilities for linked data and mapping to other thesauri and so on. It promotes interoperability, and it's very, very good for multilinguality as well. It uses SCOS, which is the Simple Knowledge Organisation System, and this is really a standard way to represent knowledge organisation systems, and it uses the Resource Description Framework, or RDF, and encoding the information in RDF allows it to be passed between computer applications interoperably, and it helps us to easily link to other vocabularies in the same formats as well. Workbench is EU funded. It's developed by the University of Rome Tor Vergata by a team of developers there. And it's widely used by other multilingual thesauri, which is one of the main reasons that we chose it as well. And that includes Eurovoc, which is the EU Publications Office thesaurus, and they're a major collaborator with Workbench. They do a lot of behind the scenes development with them as well. There's also the Digital Europa thesaurus, Agravoc, which is the Food and Agriculture Organisation's thesaurus, and the UNESCO thesaurus as well. There's 2 Workbench version updates a year, and they also do smaller releases in between. And one of the big advantages of Workbench is that it's extremely well supported by the developers. They have a very active international user group, and I mean, if you report any issues, they're very helpful and reply almost immediately. So our experience in working with them has been absolutely excellent. And we've also chosen the same combination of Workbench and Scosmos, which we'll hear about in a moment, to run HASSIT in as well at the UK Data Service. And that's a bit easier to manage, obviously, being monolingual, but so far our experience with Workbench is very good indeed. So we also chose a browsing tool to display the thesaurus online. Workbench is developing its own browsing tool, but at the time it wasn't available, and we explored a lot of different possibilities again and settled on Scosmos, which has a really nice clear interface. I'll show you a screenshot in a few moments. And we use the SCOS output from Workbench, and we use that to feed Scosmos. It's an open source browser, and it's developed by the National Library of Finland. And of course, we work with the Finnish social science data archive, which very much helped and eased our relationship with them too. It has a multilingual user face, so you're not restricted to just searching in English. It's easy to search and browse. It shows a nice structured display, and you can see the concept hierarchy, or you can see an alphabetical list as well. And again, the VocBench and SCOSMOS combination are kind of proven because they're used by EuroVoc and AgriVoc and UNESCO. And SCOSMOS is fairly customizable, which we felt was a very good advantage because there's certain things that we wanted to show. And as well as being used alongside VocBench, it's also quite widely used as a browsing application. For example, Bartok use the SCOSMOS interface, but their own backend, and the Lothair COVID-19 Thesaurus as well uses SCOSMOS to browse and a different backend Thesaurus. Again, similar to VocBench, there's 2 SCOSMOS version releases a year, and again, it's very well supported by the development team, and they have quite an active international user group, and they encourage queries and feedback as well. So, okay. So looking at the process now, this looks really neat. It's all set out in one slide, but it encompasses an awful lot of work over several years. Because we were concentrating on doing the technical development and the transfer between technical systems in 2020, we kept the content work updates for ELST that year to a minimum. We added a term for COVID-19 because obviously we all know what happened in 2020, and we added some terms on infrastructure as well. We kept the development to a minimum so that we could concentrate on putting it into the systems and making sure everything worked in technical terms as well. We've caught up with more revisions and updates for 2021 to 22. For example, in 2021, we released a new version of the environment hierarchy with updated terms. And also this year, we'll be releasing an updated hierarchy for gender and sexuality as well. And of course, we hope to include the 2 new languages. So what we did, so going back to the process of development, we met with the EuroVoc and AgriVoc teams, and we had a very useful collaboration with them. They were very generous with their time and very keen to help us indeed, and we learnt a lot from their guidance and their experiences. We installed VocBench and loaded ELST into it. We mounted SCOSMOS on the CESSDA web platform and put in the VocBench output to test the migration process. We tested all functionality in both interfaces, and we did find some issues which we reported back to the VocBench and SCOSMOS teams, and most were fixed very quickly indeed. And they were very good and very responsive to our feedback. A not insignificant task, of course, was updating all the user guides and the training materials that we provide for translators, which were revised and updated. And it all culminated in a successful release for ELST on the CESSDA platform on the 16th of November 2020. Okay, and here's a screenshot. I thought you might like to see the end result. This is the COVID-19 term that we put in 2020. You can see it's got a nice clear interface, and you can see the hierarchical list on the left-hand side with an alphabetical option you can click to as well. You can see the broader terms and the narrower terms. So you can see the family of terms and the hierarchy in which the terms belong to. You can also see the entry terms or the synonyms, which will lead you to the preferred term, which is COVID-19. You can see some of the translations here as well, although this is just a screenshot, of course. In the case of COVID-19, of course, it's a pretty universal term across the languages. I would urge you to, if you're interested, please do have a look at ELST. All the links, for example, to the broader concepts and the translations and within the hierarchy and alphabetical structure are all clickable. So this is really only a screenshot of its functionality. And if you're interested in anything, if you find anything, please send us your feedback. Okay. Well, looking at the ELST development process as a whole, it was significant work to upgrade the technical platform. the rewards have been well worth it, I think. The improved technology is much easier to use and much easier to look at, and it brings new possibilities as well. For example, it's easy to link and map to other Thesaurian ontologies, and it has URI links and so on. We've got increased international visibility because it's based on the CESSDA platform rather than at the UKDS. And this means more uptake of ELST potentially, more potential collaborations with other European organisations. For example, it's gone into the EOSC marketplace now, so it's very highly visible. The upgrade of metadata standards and also the CC licensing as well, the change in licensing, has made it a bit easier for us to meet the FAIR and the open science recommendations, along with CESSDA policies. So that's a big step forward for us. Obviously, the move to a new system meant extensive training and support for translators, and we continue to do this. We run training sessions and refresher training as well. We also provide an email and support list for them, and we have a regular meeting series, and we keep in constant contact with them to make sure that they're okay and they're able to do their translations. Working in VocBench can be a bit complex if you don't come from a metadata background. I think speaking to Eurovoc and AgriVoc, they tend to issue Excel files of updates for translators to work on offline, but we have the translators working in the system. And that's something we actually liked about VocBench, is that we were able to set up different roles in the database. For example, translators only have functionality in their languages. They can't change the structure, they can just do the translations and so on. So having that level of control, it was very, very helpful for us as well. The only slight drawback we can see is that we've moved to Creative Commons license, which is great, and obviously that's very much in keeping with the FAIR principles. Obviously, moving to an open license means less oversight of who is using ELST, especially if people are able to just download it and load it into their systems and so on. In these days of funding, obviously, we have to provide details of impact and how the system's being used and that sort of thing. And it's not that the CC license is anything bad. I mean, ELST has always been free to use, but obviously when the UK Data Service looked after licensing, because people had to apply for a license, it was then a little bit easier for us to see who was using it and how they were using it and how we could help them as well. CC license is great, and we're delighted that ELST is more open, but it just does mean we have to work a little harder to prove impact. And I think that's probably in common with a lot of developments and projects at the moment. Okay. So looking towards the future, we're currently, again with impact in mind, we're currently working with the CESSDA service providers to assess the use of ELST across CESSDA start with, to see how they use it in their metadata, how they use it in their own systems and so on. And then we think that that will be a better way that we can meet their needs and also make it a more market it as a product to people outside CESSDA as well. Obviously, we want to make it a high quality core product and ensure that it is useful, it is usable, and we are reflexive in, you know, we can update it to meet social science developments. You know, when new research is coming out, obviously you need keywords to cover that. We're currently working on the integration of ELST into other CESSDA services, which is, for example, the CESSDA data catalogue will be the first one, and that will enable us to improve search results, we think, by adding a degree of consistency. We're looking at new languages. Obviously, we've got Hungarian and Icelandic hopefully being released in September this year. We've also had some further interest. We're at the very early stages, for example, of discussion of an Italian translation. So we certainly hope that we can add more new languages as we go along. ELST is being exported to external portals and platforms. As I mentioned, it's in the European Open Science Cloud, EOSC marketplace, and it's also going into the European Language Resource Coordination system as well, probably later this year. And there's other multilingual thesauri in there, for example, GEME, which is the General Multilingual Environmental Thesaurus, and the Finnish Music Thesaurus, or Musa, are already in there as well. And we're looking at, obviously, in conjunction with how the CESSDA goals over the next few years, we're looking at increasing usage, looking at new markets, maybe beyond Europe. Obviously, if it goes beyond Europe and we extend beyond European languages, we might eventually have to change the name and not restrict it to European language. We're looking at the web traffic analysis behind the scenes to see where our web hits for ELST are coming from, and see if we can use that to steer our development. And we're also looking at developments in artificial intelligence as well, projects. We hopefully, if it is funded, we'll have projects starting sometime soon, looking at automated keywording tools beyond those which are all already available, and looking at further projects as well. Obviously, automated keywording is really the next step forward for Thesauri. It will help users to cut down the time and resources they need to add keywords to their data items and other resources. So that's a very exciting development indeed. So we're hoping that ELST will go from strength to strength, and we're very happy to hear your feedback if you have any questions, or if you'd like to get in touch with us. Okay, so that's kind of been a whistle-stop tour through recent ELST developments, but I hope you've enjoyed hearing about the journey so far and how we've worked together with other organisations and CESSDA partners to enhance and transfer the system. The contact form with the URL here, it goes straight to the Central Thesaurus team, so it will reach us very quickly, and we welcome feedback and questions. So I would encourage you to have a look at ELST and let us know what you think about it. Okay, thank you. Okay, shall I stop sharing the screen now, Sam?
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
All right, anybody online? Wow, well, your whistle stop tour was obviously very clear. So we thank you so much for telling us all
Okay.
about this. This is great.
Yeah, okay, or everyone's asleep.
Nope, I can speak to that. They are actually not asleep, I promise.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Oh, wait, somebody has raised a hand. Is there somebody asking a question in Hova? Because I'm not well positioned.
I texted the question in Hova, but
Okay,
I can say it out loud if you can.
that
hear
would be
me.
great since you're already speaking. That makes the most sense.
Yeah, so I'm Rosa Orlandini from York University Libraries. I'm a data services librarian, and I also am a geek about Thesauri. And my question is that, and I think you already answered it, but not necessarily in the terms that, in the terminology I use. Is it linked open data compliance?
Yes.
And is
Yes.
there stable URIs? Is my first question.
Yes, there are. Yes. And this was one of our biggest advantages as we moved to the new system.
Oh, yay. And my next question is that what's your process to consider new terms?
Well, generally we have a regular content development group which meets, and we look at the existing hierarchies, and we're also led by research, by data coming into the various partner data archives, and we rely on people to say, well, you haven't got a term to cover this new piece of research, and to make suggestions to us. Suggestions tend to come in from the partners in the project, but excuse me, one of the reasons that we set up the feedback form is so that people who are not working within the ELST team or on the Thesaurus can make suggestions to us. we had to act very quickly with the pandemic because there was a lot of rapid research funding starting for COVID-19. So we had to make sure we had a term in there to cover the research that was basically being deposited at archives very quickly to be made available to users. But yeah, I mean, because some areas of this thesaurus, because it's a big thesaurus, it's hard to keep everything up to date all the time. And if, I mean, for example, anyone who's browsing who thinks, oh, well, that's no good, you know, that term's never used anymore, we encourage people to get in touch with us. One of the reasons that we're updating the gender and sexuality terms for this coming release in September is that looking at some of the terms that we had in the thesaurus while current some years ago are obviously very out of date now. And we hope that we've managed to cover everything. And we are anticipating some feedback for that. You know, we hope that, I mean, looking at some of the older terms we had, frankly, we wondered, you know, we didn't want to upset anyone or offend anyone. So it's been a very, it's been quite a long process to look at external sources and take advice and so on, and to make sure that we can update that part of the thesaurus very currently. Yes, as I say, we rely on user suggestions. Obviously, most of us are data managers and archivists, so we see what's coming in and what's needed and where the gaps are and so on. So it's a mixture of internal and external suggestions, really.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, excellent. Anything else for Sharon? Oh.
But we will circle back to the question.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, let's one more round of applause to say thank you for sharing. All
Okay.
right, our
Thank
next
you.
presenter is also remote. Let's see. Guanwen, are you there? Can you turn on your camera and join us and share your screen? Yes, yay!
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, thank you.
Nope, I do not want to end the meeting for all. That's a bad thing. I cannot minimize. I don't want, okay, never mind. In that case, I'm just gonna pretend this is not here. Can I do that? Nope, never mind. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons. I will do the introduction and then that will hopefully go away. Guanwen, am I saying that correctly, Guanwen?
Yes, that's perfect.
Excellent. Guanwen Zhang is currently
Yep.
working at the University of Alberta in Canada as a senior digital preservation specialist. He is mainly responsible for developing and coordinating preservation workflows, procedures, and policies at the University of Alberta Libraries. Mr. Zhang has both an MSc and an MLIS degree and has been working at the University of Alberta Library for about 10 years. He's presenting work done with several colleagues at the University of Alberta entitled University of Alberta Dataverse, a journey from standalone application to hosted community platform. So you should be able to share your screen and show us your slides.
Great, thank you.
And I will make sure that everything looks right here. I hope.
So can you see that well?
Yes, we can see them. Excellent.
Okay.
Please start your
Great.
presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, you know, a good day. So, you know, for us, it's in the morning. You know, yesterday I saw a workshop and it's about setting up a Dataverse for organizations, you know, with specific needs. Today, I'm going to present the Dataverse again. So, so in particular, I'm going to introduce our journey from a standalone instance and to a hosted community platform. So my name is Guanwen Zhang. I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague Huck. He is present right now in this meeting, and James Doiron and Leah Vanderjagt. So the agenda actually for this presentation is organized as follows. In the first part, I would like to give a quick overview of Dataverse, what it is, Dataverse, who developed it, and what the Dataverse is used for, and who are using. The second part, I would like to introduce the Dataverse instance at the University of Alberta. And then in the third part, I will introduce Scholar Portal's hosting platform for Dataverse. And then we will introduce our migration journey from the local instance to a community-based hosting platform. In the final part, we'll discuss, the benefits of the migration, and then also our expectations of the migrated Dataverse instance. So, Dataverse is an open source application software. It's a web-based application, and it was developed by Institute of Quantitative Social Science at Harvard University quite many years ago, and is still active or maintaining by them and then updating by them. So it is centered, around research data. It provides a platform, research data repository for organizations to publish research data, to facilitate the discovery of research data, and then also help the reuse and the citations of those published research data. And then to some extent, it offers the capability to preserve research data is based on the FAIR principle, specifically fundable, accessible, and interoperable, and reusable. And here is a snapshot of the current, usage of Dataverse worldwide. And there are 79 installations and distributed across 6 continents, and 11.7K Dataverse so far, and 137K data sets, and 2 million data files. And the download of those files is about 53.4 million. So the distribution, the geographical location is mainly clustered in North America and the Europe, and then some other part are sparsely, distributed. We developed our production instance at the University of Alberta back in 2014, and we opt to deploy the Dataverse instance locally in a virtual machine. At that time, the operating system is still CentOS 6.5. And within this virtual machine, we deployed the Glassfish web server, and this web server hosts the Dataverse application. Inside this virtual machine, we also deployed our server for statistical analysis and processing, and also ImageMagick for image processing. And external to this virtual machine, we, the application instance communicated with Google Analytics server, and also communicated with EasyID DOI server, and then the PostgreSQL database server. This is just a schematic representation of our deployment. In our organization, we have 3 different deployment environment. The first deployment environment is the development, and the second one is the staging, and then the third one is the production. The development environment is for our local developers to customize the application software to suit our specific need. And then after the development is done, and then it will be packaged and then deployed to the staging environment. The staging environment is basically, identical to the production. So whatever works on the staging environment is almost, guaranteed to work in the production. The purposes is to boost the stability and the robustness of our services, so that there's no disruption of services during the update. we constantly monitoring our instance, say, you know, is the operating system is up to date? Are the computing resource more than enough to support the application software services? Is the Glassfish server in good state? And whenever there are any problems, and the technical support staff will be notified immediately, and then they will be able to respond in time. So this gives us the opportunity to maintain services with high availability, with stability. Here is an example to show the high availability of the server and the application services. We showed a time window for 1 full year, and the green means the services is up and running, and then the red one is downtime. And then for the past 365 days, we have 27 minutes are done. Those downtime actually are scheduled in the reboot of the system. So it's you know, with a very, very high availability of the services. And here is the snapshot of our Dataverse since it is inception. In 2014, we have about 80 data sets deposited into the repository, and then 2015 is more than double, and then 2016 is a drop, but you know, still significant, and then it decreased, you know, until 2018. In the last few years, and then it's picking up the momentum and again popularity again. You can see the steady growth. On the right side, the pie chart, it shows the subject distribution. The social science, earth and the environment science, medicine and health, all of them account for more than 20% of the data set respectively. Not surprisingly, engineering and chemistry, physics, and those science research area, they have, you know, a very small percentage. Some of them are just, you know, single digit percentage, and even 1.1, 1.4 and 1.6%. So that means we still have room to improve, to recruit data sets from those research area. So the above told us Dataverse is a popular research data repository in our community. It's kind of indispensable of services. However, to sustain such services at a high availability, and we are facing a lot of challenges. The first challenge is the frequent and ad hoc releases from the upstream. For example, since 2014, we deployed our first release 3.6.2, and until you know, the end of 2021, there are 53 releases. Scheduling those frequent releases become very, very challenging. And updating scripts, we developed locally. We are used the only ones, so it's not cost effective in terms of time and the efforts. And the second challenge is the financial unpredictability. The infrastructure become obsolete. Hardware, you know, will break down, and those need to be upgraded. So that takes money. However, with unpredictable budget, and then we can, you know, hardly plan those ahead of time. And the third challenge is the centralization of IT infrastructure and the resources. We used to have a sizable IT staff in our library organization. And we also have a decent size of IT infrastructure. However, due to the centralization, we lose those IT staffs, and we also transfer the infrastructure to the central IT of University of Alberta. And the response to the problem, actually, we encountered to support those kind of repository services. It's not as fast as before. So we have to find a solution. The solution is a community-based collaborative or platform. And the Scholar Portal is an ideal one, and is hosted by the University of Toronto Library, and it has a storage on the cloud. It's called Ontario Library Research Cloud, and it's geographically distributed among 5 universities in Ontario region. So the technology they used pretty much the same as what we used locally here, and like the operating system is CentOS, OpenStack Swift for storage, Solr search engine, PostgreSQL, and so on and so forth. That give us the confidence to migrate our local instance into their community-based hosting platform. And also they will offer opportunity to integrate with third-party software, such as Archivematica and AWS S3 and Dropbox and JHoover. So far, Scholars Portal have more than 60 universities participating, and is geographically distributed across all Canada, the eastern part, the western part, Ontario regions. So the migration team have 2 sub-teams. One sub-team is from University of Alberta that consists of 2 service managers and 1 metadata librarian, a system administrator. Occasionally, other staff will help the migration process. And Scholars Portal team, they have Dataverse service manager and the digital projects librarian, and also got a programmer and other staff. The migration timeline. So we begin planning the migration in November 2020. And then in January to February 2021, we set up technical environment tools for the team to collaborate, such as Trello board and GitHub. And in March and from March to June, we developed a migration strategy. And then July, we have some small batch migration test. And then August, we developed additional scripts and improved the scripts based on the test. And we finalized the timeline and prepared the data and communicated to the user about the migrations. And then in October, we have a full migration test and the DOI transfer test. And then we have communications to the end user. And then November, we finished the migration. It takes a little bit over 1 year. The migration details. We migrated data sets, collections, user accounts, and the permissions. And the Python script were developed by Scholars Portal and use the Dataverse API to copy and recreate the data. We also developed customized scripts to recreate original data for publication in database. And we use shipless authentication to enable institutional credentials. So for different institutions, so that they can log in. So some data, a lot of migrated, like the downloader metrics. And then after the migrations, we always perform fixed check so that the source and the target are the same. Here is a snapshot of the migrated Dataverse repository. It looks like almost identical to the local instance based on the look and the feel. The challenges and the outcome. So configuration of permission on Scholars Portal Dataverse was different, and that required adjustment of UFA's policies. And the initial scripts did not return the original dataset publication dates, and then it is a kind of critical for citation. So we have to write a customized script to make it right. And then we the testing actually uncovered a time zone issue affecting publication dates. And for the migration, we needed to restrict access to U of A's Dataverse for users, but allow the scripts from Scholars Portal to run. And then we have no significant user issue reported to us. It's very, very successful. The benefit of the migration, the most obvious one is the cost of reduction. Prior to the migration, we have we require system administrator, IT manager, security manager, program analyst to work together with the librarians such as digital initiative librarian, metadata librarian, and the RDM service coordinator. But after the migrations, we eliminated the system administrator role. We don't require IT manager anymore. Security manager, we don't need it, and program analyst, we don't need it anymore. So this is a significant reduction of cost. It helps to sustain the services. And the second benefit is the sharing of infrastructure. It is shared by more than actually 60 institutions so far, and it give us the better usage of infrastructure. It's cost effective, and this needs to enhance the sustainability of infrastructure. And the third benefit is shared technical pools and a better use of expertise. Before, when we deal with frequent upgrades, we developed those kind of scripts locally, spend tons of time to do that, but we only use that once to apply to a single instance. But now, when those kind of scripts are developed, they can be applied to not only one instance, they can be extended to say, okay, 50 more instances. That's a greatest save, it's greater use of time and efforts and the knowledges and the skills of the expertise. And then with a community is better, positioned to integrate with other tools. It's more justifiable to do that. For example, like Archivematica. So it can be extended to use that to preserve the research data set. And the expectation is increase the visibility of research data sets. So because we are in a community, when people search for one instance, they may bring to other Dataverse instances simultaneously. And we hope this will increase the usage of the research data set as well.
Guanwen, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, yeah, I'm about to done. So yeah, I just would like to thank Scholar Portal's migration team, and those are Amber Lee He and Kathleen Newson and Victoria Lubitsch. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
Oh, we got one. Here comes the mic.
Thank you for your presentation. So I was wondering, did you need to make any changes to the metadata schema when you moved the Dataverse from the U of A local instance to the Scholars Portal, or change any of the metadata fields?
There's no significant change, just minor tweaks. So yeah, it's just basically when we migrate, actually, we just make sure our local instance is is very close to the target Dataverse instance. So there are no major changes in terms of metadata.
All right. Any other questions? Excellent. Well, let's one more round of applause for having them get up early in Alberta to tell us all about this.
Thank you. So I will
And
start.
you can stop sharing now. Thanks.
Yes. Okay.
All right. And last but definitely not least, we have our final presenter is in the room. Sam Spencer's in the house, as we say. And let's see if I can get this to work correctly. Yep. Where are those slides? Because I did this already.
I still haven't.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, good.
All right, so we'll go to present. And we'll go to Zoom and we'll share. And we'll share that. And I'll let Sam come up and get ready to rock and roll. And I'll tell you that Sam Spencer is CEO of Aristotle Metadata and a leader in government data management and data governance. Through the development of Aristotle Metadata, Sam has worked on a range of data initiatives across the Australian government, providing input ranging from broader data policy to the development of local metadata teams within departments. Sam has presented research on data standards and solutions at conferences in Australia and internationally with IASSIST for over 10 years. He worked for many of those years to bring IASSIST to Australia, and he finally succeeded in 2019. The way he had to convince the leadership to get us to go down under, I'm fairly certain that was the fissure that caused the universe to crack open and brought us COVID. But now that he has finally achieved that IASSIST dream, his personal goal is to demystify data management and make metadata more accessible for all users. There you go, Sam.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. No?
One thing and get rid of that. Yes. Hopefully that's right.
There we go. Perfect. Good afternoon or good morning to everybody online, wherever you are. Thank you very much for having me. I also want to give a quick thanks to my co-founder and co-presenter, Lauren, who can't be here today. She was really instrumental in this project, so I want to make sure to kind of pass that thanks along to her. Before I kind of get into the topic, I wanted to talk about something that we're all kind of familiar with. Like one of my favorite cliches in data management is this idea of the data deluge, right? Like, is everybody familiar with the idea of this deluge of data? And what it really means is like this idea that data librarians are having to take on more and more things in their daily lives. So it's not only about, archives and data librarianship managing traditional data research, but it's now things like social media analysis. How do we handle this giant piece of data? How do we handle data lineage and provenance? Where is this coming from? Sensor data and Internet of Things, like all of a sudden this is being thrown into archives and libraries to manage. This challenge of content review and governance, and search and discovery and analytics. Now libraries need to be, experts in discovery, experts in analytic tools, experts in visualization tools. It's enough to make you drown in work, right? Is this this is the thing that we're struggling with at the moment. And the one that I want to talk about the most that I think is critical to all of this is this idea of content review and governance, right? How do we manage this volume of information coming through in a way that makes sense and generates value for data organizations? So to talk about that, I kind of want to first discuss what is collaborative data management. What does that mean? And what I've kind of shown is our traditional current approach, which I call the over the fence model, right? I throw data over the fence to the librarian. I've done my job. Here's stuff. Take care of my stuff for me. And I'm seeing a lot of nods because I think this is the problem that we currently face. There's very little feedback. There's not a lot of ways for our data specialists to go, look, this is good, but what about the next stage? And the reason that that's important is it kicks off this cycle of quality improvement. If we can build ways to connect our specialists and our researchers, the people who are making data in a meaningful way, then all of a sudden we get this continued quality improvement because now our researchers know what they're doing and they're able to do it more effectively over time. What I'm going to talk about on Friday, if you're still here and you're able to attend my session, is we're going to talk about everything that we've done around building that community out, around how do we ensure that people know what they're doing and how to use it. Today is really around that data governance process. What collaborative tools can we develop to understand this? And to do that, I want to talk about a case study with a group that we've worked with that is quite interestingly enough, an investment organization owned by the Australian government. The Grains Research Development Corporation funds themselves through levies on farmers, and their entire purpose is the improvement of agricultural output for Australia. The way that they do that is they take investments from, or they take, levies from farmers and fund investments to universities to fund trials into grains research. They are specifically why Australian beer is the best. And I thank them for everything they've done. But because of this, because they're working in a very complex data environment, they started to notice this challenge of how do we manage all of this data? So lots of conflicting data standards and this challenge of finding information across repositories. So despite the fact that they don't consider themselves to be a traditional archive, they were facing many of the same challenges that we see in university archives because they were dealing with them. So as a funder, they were extracting information from it. And probably one of the key takeaways that I want us to all write down is they were having this difficulty of generating value from data continuously. They don't talk about reuse of data. It's not a thing. Reuse of data is a nice thing. It's great to have. But what they were interested in is how do they re-leverage these assets? They were paying for data. They pay for the production of this asset. And I don't know about you, but when I pay for something, I want to get more than one use out of it. Right? If I can take this thing that I've bought, if I buy my laptop, I can watch Netflix, but I can also do some work on it from time to time, right? That's me re-leveraging it in multiple ways, right? And they wanted to do the same thing. How do they bring multiples of these data assets that are together from different organizations across Australia and re-leverage that data so that a researcher could come in and go, well, I don't want to do a new farm trial. I don't want to go out and dig in the dirt. I want to take this research about barley from here. I want to take that research. I want to take this research, and I'm going to build a new product. We call that reuse. But the way that they got this project funded was they talked about it as generating additional value from that data. That is key one. Understanding how to fund these projects was generating value from that data in a tangible way. So to understand the challenge of this environment, what we see is a very traditional work program. The GRDC would fund research based on grants. They would provide access to funding for researchers to go out, dig in the dirt, and plant, they'd plant actual grains, right? Universities would then be the repositories of where this data would exist. And the GRDC would be responsible for going to those repositories and kind of finding what was there. But it wasn't this easy. It actually looked like this. Like every repository, every university was doing something slightly different. Again, really common. They liked, there was one university who liked a particular Australian data standard. There was DataCite. There was some that would only report back in Dublin core. What this meant was, first of all, there was no single unified place for them to search for this content across time. So there was nowhere for them to go. Secondly, there was a lack of consistency because of the different forms of data that were coming through. There was no consistent way for us to search across all of this information. So what they needed was they needed a project that would allow them to deliver value to their stakeholders. People who were actively funding them, actively funding these investments. What were they doing to close this value chain? What they did was they turned to us as a solutions provider and said, what we want to do is we want to build a standard framework across all of these institutional repositories. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ISO 11179 or DCAT, this is the very, very 30-second abridged version. But the idea is it provides two key aspects to metadata management. Firstly, it has what we call descriptive metadata, data about a particular asset at a particular point in time. This is my data set. There is no reuse of that content. It's my data set. You know, if you go off and collect some new data, that's a different data set, right? Again, very, very common in platforms like DDI, which is based off ISO 11179, systems like DataSite, systems like RIFCS. What they needed as well was the ability for them to do this structural metadata. We often call it things like variables traditionally, but they've used the term data element, and I'm not one to pick a fight with an ISO standards body, so I use the same terms. But it basically allowed them to record three major attributes against the data. What was the thing that I'm observing? A farm. You know, that was their core object class, a farm. What was the property I was observing? And that might be active rainfall over a period of time. And the value domain is, how do we record that? You know, is it a number? Is it text? Is it a code? So it basically gave us a very conceptual and physical understanding of the data. The idea is that this would allow them to have a consistent visualization, a consistent understanding across all of these institutions. But the problem is that there aren't many systems specifically designed to output information in an ISO consistent manner, mainly because there's no serialization. So that's not a, you know, that's just a fact of, you know, it's a very conceptual model. There's no physical representation, which kind of presents a problem. The other thing that they were looking for was this ability to develop a consistent understanding of data governance across these areas. Part of that funding agreement was for them to deliver, you know, specific concepts, specific codes, specific terminology that needed to be used. The ISO standard allowed them to develop a consistent data governance framework that would use a consistent set of terminology where they could apply endorsement to these definitions. You know, when we say farm, it means this. I'm not talking about your backyard victory farm in your garden. I'm talking about a particular plot of a particular size for a particular output, right? Who was endorsed that? Well, it allowed them to, again, capture multiple data committees, multiple standards bodies, and say, well, in particular contexts, these are the definitions that are approved. And this is the core of the ISO framework, is not only about understanding what are the conceptual and physical components, but also who has improved this, who has approved this information for use. Thirdly, was the understanding of how we're going to join all of these things together. And I'm very conscious of the time, so I'll be very brief. But basically what we looked at was the common system that allowed us to connect all of this was the Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting. It's an extraordinarily simple, lightweight mechanism to allow registries to connect together to share information. I won't go into the depth of it, but ultimately, because of its simple structure, in under 6 weeks, we're able to build this into the Aristotle Metadata Registry to allow us to begin harvesting and be harvested by other systems in this network. And it allowed them to move to what they call a federated data repository model. So they weren't looking at getting all of the data in because investment came with certain IP restrictions. You know, data was owned by certain institutional repositories. It was theirs. They didn't want to move it from where it was. It was about that federated discovery. So the idea was that researchers didn't change what they did. Researchers were able to continue along the processes that they have and then use the repository's inbuilt endpoints. Those of them that didn't have an inbuilt OAI, it is the worst acronym, OAI PMH endpoint, were able to then develop one because, again, it provided a consistent framework. What we've been able to identify is the OAI PMH framework, because of its very agnostic understanding of data, can basically be used as a transformation packet for any source of data. I throw in DDI because, like, this is the DDI community, but it allowed us to basically capture all of that information into the platform, and we did one of two things. First of all, we kept a faithful representation of what was delivered by the archivists or by the researchers. We didn't want to change that. We didn't want to strip it out. We wanted to just know what they said. And then secondly, we provided a lossy transformation to ISO 11179. That's just reality. And that was a realization through the project was we couldn't do a direct, faithful transformation of all of these formats. But by connecting both the original source and the transformation in the product, it allowed us to build a single data catalog that was able to be searched across all of these repositories, across all these institutions. The other key component of this was they were really focused on engagement across the entire organization. So one thing that we're really big on is that discovery piece. You know, this is really common in platforms like DataCite. What is the data? What are the variables? What does it mean? This is really core for that majority of our population, our researchers, our policy areas who are looking at interpreting that data. Secondly, and we'll talk about this in a second, was the idea of us bringing in a GitHub-like approvals process against the metadata directly. So our endorsers, our registrars could look at that data and have an ongoing dialogue through the platform so that researchers could kind of update that information after it had gone through the transformation process. The idea here is that data and metadata isn't just a description, it's every decision that leads up to it. And this allowed us to put in a single place, not only the metadata, but the decisions behind those approvals. And then lastly, and we'll talk about this on Friday, is we actually built for them a senior executive dashboard through the platform. The end reality is that our senior executives are the ones purchasing platforms, so they need a place to go. Like if I bought a Ferrari for you, but never showed you the keys or the car, you know, are you really going to want to drive it? Are you really going to want to be part of that investment? So what was key to that engagement was giving them part of the platform that was theirs, specifically targeted not at the data or the metadata, but an overview of everything, an overview of the metrics throughout the platform so they understood what was happening. And again, I'll be talking more about that one on Friday. What it delivered for them was a couple of key things. First of all, it allowed us to do that rich content editing. And again, I think this is the core that we're looking at for a lot of platforms, is the ability for us to understand what data is going in and how it's been documented and what it means. Probably most importantly, like I said, was that GitHub-like, you know, pull request model for understanding the data. It allowed the researchers and the reviewers to kind of collaborate in a single system so that they could open issues against things, track changes over time, and understand, why am I actually building this? You know, what does it mean? What do I need to do to make it better? On Friday, again, what we'll look at here is a little bit more about this, where we talk about how that was closing the loop for building that community, because this was the way that new users were being trained, not by us, but by other users of the platform. And then lastly, it delivered a search platform that allowed them to go in that cross-repository model. Every single part of that federated system was able to be brought into the platform and searched. It wasn't the source of truth, but it allowed them to find it so they could do that request platform. Ultimately, and I'm smack bang on time, Sam, look at that, right? So ultimately, the key thing is, and the key point that I'd like to get across to you, the people who I work with, the people who I've learned from, is the one thing that I've seen be most impactful is that top line, right? It took me a long time to change my opinion from data reuse is good to why. What is the value that we get out of that reuse of data? That becomes the message. Why do I want to do this? What exactly is the goal, right? Because again, that's the thing that gets academics involved. Well, it's not about data reuse. It's about, you know, citations. It's about, you know, it's not about reuse. It's about generating value for stakeholders. Secondly, I think collaboration is the key. And again, I'll talk more about that on Friday, is we need to be building environments so that people can work together. It's not about throwing it over the fence. That model won't scale, right? We work in an environment where metadata skills are, look at the room. Look at the room, right? Metadata skills are actually quite in demand, but there aren't a lot of people in the community, right? We need to be able to collaboratively develop so that we can, you know, teach people what they need to do through these platforms. And then lastly, and again, that key insight is being able to deliver across levels, right? These platforms that we're building have a large scale of investment. Whether it's open source, whether it's commercial, whether it's in-house, whether it's not, there's still a large investment that needs to be made. And ultimately, what we need to do is to get those senior stakeholders to the table. We need to get them to the tool. We need to tell them this is your platform, your tool, and your way that you'll understand the data, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to own it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it there because I think we're basically at time. But as I said, this is kind of a two-parter now. Is on Friday, we've got a session purely on that collaboration piece, purely talking about that community building and how we trained over 1,000 users on the platform across a 10,000 person organization. So how do we get 10% of a government organization understanding an ISO standard? And I'm going to open it up for questions. Yeah. Nobody did. I see, like, I kept the same number of people from start to finish.
So I have a couple of questions if you'll indulge me. So my first question is about the sort of GitHub feedback system that you have built into your software. I was wondering, do the data managers, so not the data producers, but perhaps the librarians or information professionals that are curating the data, are they automatically added to like follow any comments that come in from the researcher, just so that they're aware and maybe like they might want to think about changing how they're ingesting materials into their own repository? Or is that something automatic, something they have to do themselves, or that's just not happening right now?
Like, first of all, I'll indulge all of your questions. Whether or not everybody else stays, I can't control. What I will say is, like, it's done on an opt-in basis. So you submit it for review to a particular group and you go, is this suitable for a particular sector, for a particular committee? Is it using the right terms? So yeah, I think it's an opt-in, but they get notifications through the entire process.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I know that you wouldn't consider them the like executive level, but like as a repository manager, it'd be interesting, like on your platform, to get that sort of same executive overview as well.
Lots of ways that we're kind of notifying people across the platform.
Yeah. So my second question was about field searching. Is that enabled currently in your platform? And are you searching the fields that are created through your lossy, like ISO generated fields, or the original metadata, or do
both?
Both?
So basically the big term I think I've heard a couple of times at a couple of sessions was through the lossy transformation. There's a lot of faceting we can do, but again, I think the challenge there was that there was a lot of resources coming through that there isn't a direct mapping for. So we can map data sets, but mapping a book into the ISO standard isn't appropriate in a lot of cases. Both the original source and the transformation are both searchable as independent objects that are linked. So if you search for a term that isn't captured during the transformation, you'll see the original, and then you'll see a link to the transformed version as well.
All right.
Cool.
Well, in that case, we owe Sam a big round of applause for keeping us sort of on time-ish.
I want to thank you guys for being a great audience, being engaged, hanging out, not sneaking out in the middle of everything, and even being willing to be a few minutes late to the Birds of a Feather session. So if you're interested in that, run down to G3. And if you're not, I won't tell anyone. And I will see you back here tomorrow. And I hope you've enjoyed the first full day of IASSIST, and are looking forward to the rest. So thank you, and we'll see you again.